You didn't see it coming. Or maybe you did and couldn't stop it. Either way, you woke up one day and everything that used to hold you together was gone. The identity, the certainty, the sense that you knew who you were and where you were going. Gone. And what was left wasn't grief. Exactly. It was something worse. It was blankness, the terrifying absence of a self that used to feel solid. Maybe it was a relationship that ended and took your entire sense of reality with it. Maybe it was a career that collapsed and didn't just cost you a job, but cost you a reason to exist. Maybe it was depression so deep it didn't feel like sadness. It felt like erasure. Or maybe there was no single event, just a slow accumulation of pressure, until one day the structure gave way and you found yourself in the rubble, unable to explain what happened or who you are now. Here is the first mistake most people make. They treat the collapse as a problem, to be solved as quickly as possible. Get back on your feet. Rebuild. Move forward. And underneath that urgency is a single, unexamined assumption that who you were before the collapse is who you should return to. That recovery means restoration, that the goal is to reconstruct what fell. Carl Jung would call that the most dangerous thing you can do. Section 1. Jung's own collapse, 130 to 330, approximately 280 words. Jung knew collapse from the inside. After his break with Freud, the man he had called his mentor, his father figure, the center of his intellectual world, he entered years of profound He described feeling suspended in mid. He had visions he couldn't explain, dreams that terrified him, an inner world that felt like it was coming apart. By most external measures, he was failing. By his own account, he was descending. But Jung didn't try to stop the descent. He followed it. He documented it, drew it, wrote it, sat with it for years. And what emerged on the other side wasn't a restored version of the man who had broken with Freud. It was something altogether new. A psychology, a framework for human transformation, an understanding of the psyche that would define his life's work. The question isn't how to stop it. The question is whether you have the courage to understand what it's trying to say and what it's asking you to become. That process begins where you at least want to look at the identity that just collapsed and at exactly how much of you was never really there. Asterisk. Here is the thing no one tells you about emotional collapse. Most of the time, what breaks isn't you. It's the version of you that you built for other people to see. Jung called it the persona, from the Latin word for the masks worn by actors in ancient theater. Every person builds one. That's not pathology. That's adaptation. The problem comes later, when the adaptation becomes the identity. When you stop wearing the mask and start believing you are the mask. Jung watched this happen in patient after patient. A man who had defined himself entirely through professional success found that when the career collapsed, there was nothing underneath. Not a wounded person. Nothing. No preferences. No desires. No sense of what he actually valued. Just absence. Because for decades, the persona had been doing all the living, and the actual self had been quietly starving in the background. This is the specific cruelty of persona collapse. It doesn't feel like losing a role. It feels like dying. And in a very real psychological sense, something is dying. Just not what you think. What dies is the structure you mistook for yourself. The grief is real. The disorientation is real. But what you're mourning isn't yourself. You're mourning the mask and the terrible comfort of knowing exactly who you were supposed to be. Think about what preceded your collapse. How much of your daily life was organized around maintaining an image of competence, of strength, of being the person others needed you to be? How much energy went into the performance, into sustaining the version of yourself that the world had come to expect? And beneath that performance, what was there? If you're honest, maybe not much. Maybe a person who had stopped asking what they actually wanted. because the question felt dangerous, or selfish, or simply irrelevant to the life they had built. Jung was unsparing about this. He wrote that the greater the inflation of the persona, the more completely a person identifies with their social role, the more catastrophic its collapse becomes. Not because they lose more, but because they had less to begin with. The persona was covering an emptiness that had been growing for years. The collapse didn't create that emptiness. It revealed it. And this is where the real work begins. Not in rebuilding the mask faster, not in finding a new role to inhabit, but in sitting with the question that the collapse is finally made unavoidable. Who are you when there is no performance required? Not who you were trained to be, not who others needed you to be. Who are you when the theater is empty and the mask is on the floor? Asterisk, your collapse didn't begin on the day everything fell apart. It began months earlier, maybe years. There were signals, small ones at first, then louder. You ignored them or managed them or reframed them as the normal cost of the life you had chosen until the system ran out of room to compensate, and the whole thing came down at once. Jung didn't believe in psychological accidents. He believed the psyche was purposeful, not in a mystical sense, but in a structural one. Symptoms don't appear randomly. Depression, burnout, identity crisis, the sudden inability to keep functioning. These are not failures of willpower. They are communications. The unconscious speaking in the only language left to it after everything else was ignored. The question worth asking, and most people never ask it, is not, why did this happen to me? That question keeps you passive, positioned as a victim of circumstance. The real question is, what was I refusing to see? Because the collapse almost always arrives at the exact point where the gap between the life you were living and the life that was true to you became too wide to sustain. Jung called what lives in that gap the shadow. Everything you rejected about yourself pushed into the unconscious, where it continued to exert pressure whether you acknowledged it or not. Shadow material doesn't disappear. When you refuse to look at it, it accumulates. It finds indirect expression in chronic tension, in inexplicable sadness, in the faint but persistent sense that something is wrong without any identifiable cause. And when the pressure becomes great enough, it doesn't ask permission. It erupts. Depression is frequently not emptiness. It is rage with nowhere to go. Burnout is frequently not exhaustion. It is a self that has been performing a life it cannot sustain. Your collapse has the same structure Jung's did. Something in you knew before you did. The signs were there. The growing dissatisfaction. The symptoms that appeared before the breaking point. The part of you that was exhausted not by circumstance, but by the constant effort of sustaining something false. The collapse didn't betray you. It was the most honest thing your psyche had done in years. Asterisk, this is what waits on the other side of genuine individuation. Not happiness in any simple sense. Not the absence of pain or loss or difficulty, but a kind of solidity. A self that knows what it is, that is no longer held hostage by the fear of being seen as insufficient. So here is what that building actually requires, not as inspiration, but as practice. First, stop measuring your progress by external reconstruction. The new job, the new relationship, the return to productivity. These are not evidence that the work is done. What matters is whether the interior has changed. Second, continue the descent even when stability returns. The temptation, once you can function again, is to stop examining. Don't. The stabilization is not the destination. It is the platform from which the real work continues. Third, when the shadow material surfaces, the anger, the need, the grief, the parts of yourself you find difficult, do not manage it back into silence. Write it, though. Say it out loud to someone who can hold it. Let it exist in consciousness long enough to be understood. And fourth, make one decision, however small, that is true to the self the collapse revealed, rather than the self the collapse destroyed. Not a dramatic gesture, A single honest choice about how you spend your time, what you say yes to, what you finally refuse. That choice is the first stone of the new foundation. The work does not end here. Individuation is not a destination. It is the direction of a life. What you carry forward from this collapse, how you use what it revealed, whether you build on truth or reconstruct the illusion, that is the question your psyche has been trying to ask you for longer than you know. You have heard it now. What you do with it is yours entirely.